Welcome. I'd like to call the meeting, the council meeting of Monday, December 21st, 2020 to order. First, we'll start with playing the national anthem. So all rise. Up next, we have number 4, approval of the agenda. Or sorry, up number 3, any disclosures of pecuniary interest?
Yes, Mayor Jordan, I have a disclosure. I have conflict with an item. The heritage study. My parents live on Main Street.
All right, that will be noted. Number 4, approval of the agenda. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Dunstall. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Dunstall. Resolved that the agenda for the council of December 21st, 2020 be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Move to number 5, adoption of previous minutes. Committee of the Whole minutes, December 14th, and council minutes from December 14th. Need a mover and seconder. Councillor Cadwell, Councillor Vane. Moved by Councillor Cadwell, second by Councillor Vane. Resolved that the Committee of the Whole minutes of December 14th, 2020 be approved, and that council minutes of December 14th, 2020 be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Move to number 6, council endorsement package. CEP 20-03 is going to speak on this or not? Or we just, all right. Need a mover and seconder to get this on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Bothwell. Councillor Vardy.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to express some comments. First of all, I ask that my colleagues allow me to speak without interruption, even though they may not agree with my comments. I have received an overwhelming response from the community probably 60 to 70 emails, all in favor of the HCD study, with 2 email exceptions. There are 2 major concerns that arise: the need to preserve Grimsby's heritage and the need to control over-intensification on Main Street East. Despite repeated requests to the planning department to know where they have had discussions with the region on locations for planning intensification in Grimsby, we are only now informed by reading a consultant's report on development charges. I have also heard from a developer on more than one occasion that a 5-story parking garage is planned or desired by the region for Main Street East. And I would like our Director of Planning to clarify what discussions or inquiries she has made with regard to this. The concerns of residents are legitimate, and I know many of us campaigned on responsible development, including my fellow Ward 2 councillor, Dave Cadwell. For the record, I am not against development or developers, and I would like to point to a specific example on Main Street East of a very elegant townhouse development called Vintages, where the developer has certainly taken care to build something that fits in with the surrounding established residential neighborhood. This is the kind of development that needs to be encouraged. I do not believe that 5-story condos and 7-story apartment buildings share the vision and desire of what the community sees as responsible development for this area. And that is currently what's being proposed, which brings me directly to the HCD study. The strongest protection we can have for Main Street East is an HCD designation. I understand and expect that not all of Main Street East would be encompassed by the HCD, but the study process will guide what should be in and what should be out, as well as undertake the requisite fulsome consultation, which everyone would like to see. We have come to learn through the recent development charges study that HCD studies can be paid for, at least in part, by development charges, so they need not be part of the tax levy. A major developer, Losani Homes, in their letter to us, say they support the HCD study. However, they believe the DeVries lands, which they own, should not be included. That will, too, be determined by the study. Our staff had concerns that an HCD heritage district will not provide all the protections that are needed for Main Street East. However, they have been in discussion with the region to target this area for intensification. Can they confirm to us that it is not over intensification? I ask that our staff provide clarification on this, as it seems to be somewhat contradictory. I ask that our CAO and planning staff represent the needs of the community to the region, as reflected by the elected council, and support the direction the community has asked elected officials to support. I ask that each of my fellow councillors state in their remarks whether they support 5-story condos and 7-story apartment buildings on Main Street East, so that the public know where each of us stand in principle. For the record, I do not. I ask that our CAO and planning staff do all they can to protect heritage in Grimsby, push back on over-intensification, and put in place the tools, in addition to the HCD study, to support the Main Street East community. And finally, I ask my colleagues to support the community and vote in favor of the HCD study. Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I just want to seek clarification from the clerk, please, on the process that we're going to undertake for approval of this endorsement package. Are we now doing all of our discussion on it, at which time we will vote on the endorsement package? Or, as I note, there is a report from planning staff further in the meeting today. What is the order of business? And then depending on that, I may have some further comments.
Sir.
You, Mr. Mayor. as approved under the approval of the agenda, the order would be the council endorsement package. And then once that is complete, we'll do the report PA 2027. So we're not certain, depending on the outcome of the CEP, it's possible that report PA 2027 might not be discussed in detail.
Thanks. That's what I was wondering, because I was just curious as to how that was going to transpire, considering that planning has not contributed any further to this endorsement package at this point. And it's being brought forward as it came from the Heritage Committee. So as I understand it, we will be voting directly on this motion that's in here. Is that correct?
The CEP, yes.
Okay. So I do have a number of other points to make, Mayor Jordan, if I can beg your indulgence on this.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Bothwell.
So first of all, I want to clarify how this draft amended bylaw came about from the December 8th Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. So it started with a presentation by staff on their recommendations to our committee, as well as there was legal present. We had a recess where, because legal had not been provided with the draft bylaw, which was the intent for them to review it, which we took a break and they came back. And the intent of that break was for them to review it and to remove any reference to the interim control bylaw, which is 40.1 brackets 1 of the OHA, because the committee determined that in order to move the study forward and to address the concerns that were raised by the residents, that the removal of the interim control study, interim control area or study area for the 1-year term was very important, so that the study could commence without it. So while the lawyers reviewed the draft wording of the bylaw and came back, I clarified with them if the wording had been modified in the bylaw appropriately, so that it only addressed the section of the OHA, which was the area of study, and they agreed that it did. I just noticed that there's a typo in the draft bylaw when it does only refer to the area of study under the OHA, section 40. Just pulling out my copy. 40 brackets 1, rather than being under 40.1 brackets 1, which is designation of study area, which is for the interim control bylaw portion. The reference should be to 40 brackets 1 area study. The council of a municipality may undertake a study of any area of the municipality for the purpose of designating one or more heritage conservation districts, and it goes into the scope of the study. So I want to make it very clear that that was the intent that was given to the lawyer to help with the drafting, and that it appears that it's just an oversight, that the reference should have been made to 40 brackets 1 rather than 40.1 of the OHA. And then that the mapping and the area that is proposed is a prospective boundary, which would be to guide the consultant in as he would proceed to do the research on determining the actual geographic boundaries of the scope of the study as per the OHA. So in order to help prepare the consultant for what the area that is proposed by the community, the draft was attached from the frontages of Main Street, from the boundary of the east boundary to Robinson, and as Appendix A. So I just want to clarify that that was fully the intent to address the concerns of the community, and that the priority of the committee was to address that the study commence as a priority. I just want to further add a few other quick points that, you know, having read the planning director's reports that are coming further into this meeting, as well, that the boundary doesn't need to be defensible now. It's a part of the actual study outcome, and a part of the final definition of the boundary shall come from the findings of the research and the community consultation process. And that's important to note, that it's prospective, and coming from Brampton, the director would be aware that a prospective boundary is a guideline for the study to start from, but it will obviously include or exclude properties as the research continues, depending on whether it's contributing or non-contributing properties, whether it's contiguous, and what other elements of heritage may need to be preserved. I think it's also important to know that the report that comes further tonight also recommends that we move to looking at other options such as secondary plans again. And all I can say is that we've been there, we've done that. Community didn't want it. And it's like Groundhog Day all over again. And no, that's not the strongest tool that we need. We know we need a stronger tool, and the community has asked for us to look at that. And there's a lot of research and references on what is the strongest tool. And it is an HCD designation, a plan and a designation. I'm just going to say again that a couple of reports again, the Assessing the Success of Heritage Conservation Districts Insight from Ontario, Canada, Robert Shipley is a contributor to that report as well, talks about, in spite of the above shortcomings, many civic officials now consider the Heritage Conservation District to be one of the most effective tools, not only for historic conservation, but for good urban design and sound planning. It's the tool that captures all of those things. The town of Goderich benefits of district designation. While the policy tools found in the Planning Act are effective when used in combination with nationally accepted standards and guidelines for heritage conservation, designation of a district under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act is the means by which a municipality puts those tools and guidelines to use and fills the policy gap left by the Planning Act. The protection of the Main Street corridor. Our official plan says the town shall undertake heritage plans and programs in accordance with the system of priorities. In particular, the following shall be identified as priorities for the town. Protection of the Main Street corridor. That's what we're doing. We have over 64 properties between end to end that are between 70 and 170 years old. We have other vistas and views and other contributing elements. There's a huge Indigenous population that needs to be respected through the neutral burial ground. We have a lot of areas here that are significant that require an expert consultant to tell us, not for us, not for planning, not for council to say, this is what the boundary should be. We need a consultant that is a heritage expert to take this area, look at what our cultural areas of importance are, and to define that for us. We can't say now, we can't say take this out, take that out. That's the role of the consultant through the scope of the study. So I think there's a lot of work that we can do if we just start it. And we've gone now a year without starting it. We know this is the strongest tool. There are study after study that says it. We don't need to go back to the drawing board and have another consultant and pay a project authority to go and tell us what we need. The community has told us what we need. They have said, this is what we want. Our role as a Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee is to listen to the community and bring that advice and recommendations to council. And that's what we've done. And it's been a long process, and the committee has spoken over many, many times to say, this is what we desire is the strongest protection and tool for Main Street. I'm just going to say that if the clerk can look at this draft bylaw, if it doesn't serve the purpose as intended, the way it's worded, if it doesn't need to be a bylaw, its potential is that it just needs to be a resolution. Because we're not invoking the interim control section. We're requesting that council move forward with section 40, area of study, and perhaps a resolution is all that's required to do that, and that it move forward with the rest of the content of the proposed bylaw. So instead of being a bylaw, just a motion resolve that. So I would ask the clerk to clarify if it would be appropriate that this just be worded as a resolution, considering we're only applying section 40, brackets 1, area of study of the OHA, rather than a bylaw to invoke an interim control, which we're not doing. So I just would ask for clarification on that. And I would hope that I can speak again later to this if needed, but thank you.
I have a point of order on that, Mr. Mayor. We have a recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, and that would be changing their recommendation moving forward. So I understand Councillor Bothwell's point, but this came from that would have to have been changed at the Heritage Advisory Committee, in my opinion.
So we're not changing anything, Councillor Ritchie. It's just
changing it from a bylaw to a resolution.
Well, because it was originally asked of the legal counsel if removing the interim control portion was sufficient in order for this to move the study forward, and we were guided by that saying yes.
Unfortunately, that's not what came forward.
That's fine. So understanding that it's applying to section 40, brackets 1 of the OHA area of study, there is no interim control bylaw here in this draft. It's just how the draft is presented. And it's a matter of administrative process that I'm asking the clerk to clarify whether the bylaw wording is appropriate or whether it should be a resolution. I don't see that as,
Mayor, I asked for a point of order. This was brought from the Grimsby Advisory Committee. They put it on the floor, and that's what I think it should stay as.
I'm going to call on Tom Helinski to make a determination there. Tom?
Good evening. Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, am I being asked to advise whether this is consistent with the recommendation from the committee or whether it needs to be a bylaw or a resolution?
Whether because the interim control bylaw was removed, is it properly as a bylaw or a resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think while it arguably can proceed as a resolution, there is really no substantive difference as to whether it proceeds by bylaw or resolution. As a principal, council speak through bylaws, except we're expressly permitted to speak through resolutions, and therefore, there is certainly no downside to this matter proceeding by bylaw in procedural terms. And just if I may, while I'm speaking, Councillor Bothwell is quite right. The reference ought to be to 40 sub 1 as opposed to 40.1, and that's one of the clerical revisions that I think I alluded to when I answered the question at Heritage Committee. It just it hasn't been picked up yet, but it certainly would be in the final version if the bylaw goes forward.
Thank you. Councillor Cadwell?
Now I'm confused. So a resolution was brought forward, a revised draft bylaw on December the 8th from the advisory committee. Now, how can that be changed without the approval of the whole committee? Because maybe somebody on the committee might not support it.
sorry, can I answer that? Can I answer that, Mayor Jordan?
Yes, Councillor Bothwell, by all
So
means.
we're not changing- As the legal advice was just received, we're not changing it. It's being presented as it is, exactly as it is. The only correction is a typo, as Mr. Linsky pointed, into the section reference. That's the only change that's being corrected, and that's an administrative correction.
Got it right here in front of me. Again, it says revised draft bylaw. Was there any?
That's because it was revised because the interim control bylaw was taken out of it, I
I
believe.
understand
Is that correct, Councillor Bothwell?
But is that at the will of the whole committee?
Yes, it was. That's correct, Mayor Jordan. It was passed by the whole committee to remove the interim control bylaw section and to amend the bylaw to be area of study only under section 40 brackets 1, and legal counsel can attest to that as well.
Okay, I got a couple questions. Back on again, I'm gonna call it the way I see it. It still says revised draft bylaw. Was there any staff input?
Councillor Cadwell, the clerk's going to clarify that for you.
Just to make it easier, so if you look at our agenda attachment for the CEP 20-03, it states that the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, whereas section 40.1 of the Ontario Heritage Act, so that's being corrected to whereas section 40 bracket 1 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It's the first sentence in the resolution.
Be nice if I had some time to absorb this. Okay, I'm just gonna go back to my questions. Was there any staff input back on December 8th to the for the recommendation of approval designated to the designated Main Street conservation study? Was there any staff input?
Mayor Jordan, I can speak to that.
Councillor Bothwell, go ahead.
Chair of the committee.
Yes,
It's a
Yes,
point of order. I think the question was to if staff had any input, and I would expect the chair to speak to this, not another counselor.
That's the way it usually works.
So I'm supposed to determine whether staff had any input at the Heritage Committee meeting?
Sorry, point of clarity. I mean the chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee.
All right, Councillor Dunstall.
Yes, Councillor Dunstall. Well, the staff had a report that they brought forward that night and reviewed it with the committee. And this is part of the endorsement package.
Does that clarify it for you, Councillor Cadwell?
Thank you. Again, this whole study, what was the public input to it? How much was there and how did it take place in that?
Mayor Jordan, would you like me to speak to
Oh,
that?
well,
Yes, that's
it's not a study right now. We're at the a bylaw to move into a study. So there will be public input in a heritage cultural district study, and it again is the best way to protect heritage.
Well, I agree, Mayor. I totally support heritage. All right, that's it for now. Thank you.
Antonetta?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. Staff had the opportunity and was directed by council to review the first bylaw that had the interim control measures paired with it. The second bylaw was presented at the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee that evening. Staff did not see it ahead of time. And so we haven't provided comment to it to the Heritage Committee, but we have proactively tried to address it in tonight's report. So just for clarification, staff did not have an opportunity to review that, and you have not heard our comments on that. That is what is presented in this evening's report. Thank you.
Councillor Frake?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to talk.
I'm going to keep this kind of high level, and I'm going to read from some notes. First, I'd like to say thanks to the many constituents who have taken the time to send their views on this particular study and the need for this particular study over the past week or so. And I must say that the majority of the feedback I received was very cordial, constructive, and appropriate. However, I should also mention that there were a few people who felt that intimidation, insults, and some scare tactics against me would also be more effective, but sorry, that doesn't bode well with me. I just want to say that I perform my job as a councillor to the best interests of this great community very, very seriously. And let me also say here and now that I campaign on integrity, visibility, and accountability. And I will continue to do so for the community. I cannot please every single person that I represent, but I will do my utmost to what's right for my ward and for the community at large. And I apologize to those people who don't agree with all my decisions. And I hope that you appreciate that we cannot always please everyone. So anyways, moving on, many of us campaigned on this particular issue. We promised our community that we would review and protect our Grimsby's heritage and culture as much as we possibly can. And that's what this opportunity gives us. And that includes Main Street East. This isn't about one or two residents. It's about the community at large. So we have to listen to the community at large, not just a few people. When the council developed their strategic priorities, and here, we spent a long time debating and struggling over what we wanted in this plan. And if you note item 5 in that plan, it says to protect our heritage and culture. And I assume that Main Street East falls into that category. So when we did that, and you can all read this, it's on our website, everyone can read this. One of the key initiatives was directly related to the protection of heritage and culture. It reads as follows: heritage and culture, protecting, preserving, and enhancing Grimsby's distinct heritage and culture. I think this study will help us do that. The study itself is a key factor, and it's a study. We're not doing the Magna Carta here. It's going to be a study. It's a key factor and an important step in establishing what should or shouldn't be part of our heritage culture along Main Street East. And so the study, it'll determine what our guidelines should be for future, so we can decide on what we do with future developments. And I just encourage our council to look at that. I mean, we're all have kind of dug our heels in a lot of things here, but this is a study. It'll move us forward and help us deal with future development along Main Street East. So I will be voting yes. So I encourage the rest of my fellow councilors to do the same thing. Anyways, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you very much. I guess I would just like to reinforce some of what Councillor Frake has said, that heritage and responsible development are things that most of us campaigned on, and they are part of the town's strategic priorities, which, hard to believe, but we had consensus on in doing that prioritization exercise. I believe that we're at a critical crossroads for wards 1 and 2 with respect to Main Street East. And we're at a fork in the road. And the HCD plus whatever other tools that our planning department can suggest are what is going to be able to help us act on those strategic priorities. So we're at a fork in the road. If this doesn't go, we open ourselves up in a way that the community does not want part of Main Street East opened up. And all I can say is that after the vote tonight, I hope and I expect the community will remember this night when they vote again in 2022. Thank you.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan. I just want to thank all the constituents who did send me emails. I did receive a lot of emails and phone calls on this subject. And just hearing the councillors speak about the importance of heritage, and which I totally agree with. But also now I'm reading through the staff report, and everything that was brought up by the councillors, Vardy and Frake, is right here in the staff report. There are 7 elements of planning that are all right there. Everything they said, right here. So anyways, those are just my comments for now. It's all there. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to reiterate that point. Reading the staff report, every comment that was mentioned, all the tools that we use, we need multiple tools to protect heritage, and it's all in that staff report. So I just wanted to ask a point of clarity. If this council endorsement package from the Grimsby Advisory Committee is voted down, we will have an opportunity to accept staff's report, which encompasses many tools to help protect the area. So, but we would be able to vote on that report. Is that correct? I guess I'm asking the clerk for the point of clarity that if this is voted down, as the council endorsement package from the Grimsby Advisory Committee is voted down, we will still be able to look at the staff report and support that, which has all the tools that I think we need to support the area.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the next item is PA 2027, and planning will provide recommendation through that report.
Thank you. So again, once I've heard from several councilors here, I will be not supporting this endorsement package, as I'm looking to support staff's report, which uses multiple tools and even a mention of a smaller HCD in their report. Thank you.
So, Mr.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, Mayor. So is the endorsement package part of this report for 9A, the report Main Street East, or is the endorsement package the staff report? Can I get clarification there? And then I have some comments. This is a endorsement package from staff?
To clarify,
Yeah, clarify.
through you, Mr. Mayor, the endorsement package is the recommendation brought forward from the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. And the next item in report, so 9A, report PA 2027, that's the staff's report, which is the next agenda item after the CEP 20-03.
Okay, well, it's all mixed together, and when I looked at the, but let me say this, because I know some of us out there that are listening aren't going to appreciate what I'm going to say, but we had a secondary plan brought forward from the previous council called the Hospital Corridor Secondary Plan. We sat in council and were instructed by our interim planning director, who told us that we could make the terms of reference in the secondary plan. We decided to vote that down, leaving us wide open for developers to come in and do what they have done thus far. And 2 years later now, we're looking at a heritage district study without an interim control bylaw, which the previous study had. It had an interim control bylaw. So we sit here today with this situation, which seems very urgent, but we chose this path. I was not for it, and I support staff with their expertise, because they're telling us that there's multiple tools to control this area. We have sat in camera and listened to legal advice, and it isn't only a heritage district study that will work for this entire area. There's multiple tools that will work. And I just can't sit here and ignore staff who are the professionals who we hire to give us the advice, and to allow a counselor at this point to tell us what's the best for us, and have convinced many residents out there that it is the best tool. I have trouble accepting that, because our counselor, as well as she knows what she knows, isn't the professional with the education to give us the advice that we've been given. And I can't ignore that. I can't sit here and ignore that. And please, I love heritage, and everybody knows that, because I own a heritage building that what is now designated that wasn't when I bought it. So I have a lot of passion for heritage. And again, I do not like to hear about condos. And this is why we have to do this heritage study, because that means we're weaponizing this heritage study to prevent condos. I think we could have prevented it 2 years ago, but we chose not to. We chose to take this path where we are today, and we have nobody to blame but ourselves. But I cannot support on its own as a standalone vehicle to cover the Main Street East. A heritage district study is not the only answer to the Main Street East corridor. And we need to protect it with multiple tools, and I support the staff. Thank you.
Councillor Bain.
Yes, Mayor. As everybody has spoken except myself and Councillor Sharp, I'd like to call the question, please. We can go on this all night. I just rather call the question. Thank you.
Can I make a comment? Yeah. All right, before Councillor Bain's called the question, but since this is so important, I'm going to make a couple comments. Secondary plans, all well and said. Some councillors say that they protect everything. Well, look what happened. The city, or the town of Ancaster in Hamilton, put forward a secondary plan earlier in 2020. And during the secondary plan, the Wilson House, built in 1792, on Easter Sunday, it was torn down. And it was torn down because the developer was allowed to proceed with a demolition during a secondary plan. And this is why we need the Heritage Cultural District done first, and then we protect our heritage inventory in this area. Then we move to a secondary plan, and then we move to the other tools. We have to do it in this way to protect heritage. And so in my opinion, which I will vote for this, that's how we do it. We start with the HCD, then we move to a secondary plan. So we protect our heritage first, and then we figure out what to do with the rest of the properties that are around. And that's the way we do it, and that's the correct way to do it. So the question has been called by Councillor Bain. We need a mover and seconder.
Recorded vote.
Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Frake. Recorded vote.
Just a point of clarity, Mr. Mayor. We are voting on, what are we exactly are we voting on right now?
Call the question.
We're voting to call the question.
Call the question, right? Not on the endorsement package. So I just wanted to make sure that's clarified.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will be supporting to call the question.
Councillor Bothwell,
No.
Councillor Dunstall,
Yes.
Councillor Frake,
No.
Councillor Cadwell,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Councillor Vane,
Yes.
Councillor Vardy,
No.
Mayor Jordan.
No.
This required 2/3 majority, so that's defeated.
So where's the speaker's order? Does it start over again?
No.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I would just like to add to the comments regarding the hospital quarter secondary plan and the number of tools that are proposed in the next report. The hospital quarter secondary plan, I don't know if other councillors have actually looked at the terms of reference, which we did not have as a town, and we weren't in council at the time, an opportunity to contribute to the terms of reference because the region refined it with our planning staff. And the only wording in the terms of reference with respect to heritage is develop approaches that protect, integrate, and enhance existing built heritage resources within the plan area. So there were no protections put into the terms of reference for anything that was not an existing designated property. And there were only 4 properties identified in that terms of reference that would be having some kind of protection, whether it's just a buffer zone around how close they make the development. That's the kind of protection that was in the hospital quarter secondary plan terms of reference. So just so you know, that's as much heritage as we were going to get out of that plan. The second item I just would like to address quickly is the number of tools that are being proposed. I appreciate the mayor's conversation there that yes, the Heritage Conservation District study and plan are the strongest tool to put in place first. The order is correct. And then the next tools that we can apply is perhaps a secondary plan or a demolition permit. Some of those options that are being proposed are a little bit of a stretch, I would say, in the sense that the CPPS or the Community Planning Permit System, there's only 4 municipalities that have ever used it. Since the Heritage Act, there's 134 HCDs. Those 4 municipalities, one is Brampton, the 3 others did it because they were maintaining their development around their lakes for boat docks and stuff. So it's not a very highly accepted system. And in fact, it's another way that the province can take over zoning amendments, a site plan application, minor variance, and take all of the public participation away from those and turn it over to planning staff to make those decisions. It doesn't allow any public engagement or appeal process. So there's some at the beginning when it's developed, the CPPS, yes, you have all input, but once it's in place, and I'm sure they'll get into this in the report, there's just less public input.
Sorry, Councillor Bothwell. Antonetta has a comment and then you can continue.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, staff's report does not recommend a CPPS or a development permit system. It listed as all of the tools that we analyze, but we are not recommending that for the Grimsby community. We are indeed recommending a heritage conservation district, a demolition control bylaw as an interim measure, and another planning instrument, the most comprehensive way that we can protect Main Street East and address all of the public feedback that we've received. And staff have analyzed over 700 pieces of data provided to us by the community. All of that is outlined in our report, and I look forward to our opportunity to speak to our report and to provide our presentation. Thank you.
So to continue, I'm sure that we'll get some more in-depth explanation as to how the director feels a heritage conservation district plan can be put into a secondary plan, because unless it's under Part 5, we're not protecting the heritage, and Part 5 requires that it be in consultation with the Heritage Committee and it be a plan under Part 5 of the Act. So we're supporting the same thing here. If I'm hearing her message that she's supporting an HCD, that's what we're doing here in this motion. Some of the other tools she suggested, again, is a secondary plan. We've been there. I said it's like Groundhog Day all over again. The community doesn't want that. It can be an addition after an HCD, which is the primary tool the community is asking for. And again, I need to say is, who is driving the bus? The community is telling us what they want. That's what's in the toolkit. That's what's in the Act. It says if a community comes forward and says, this is how we want to protect what's important to us, we as a council need to listen to that voice. And that's what our priority needs to be. So anyway, I'm just suggesting again that we've heard, and there's a number of reports that the HCD tool is the strongest tool. And I'm just going to say that again, that I don't think revisiting, putting 100,000 into a planning
point of order,
to a planning consultant and a project authority to tell us what we need is the answer. And that's what's proposed in the report.
Antonetta?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, another point of clarification. Staff are proposing a heritage conservation district under Part 5. It is the only way under the Ontario Heritage Act to proceed with a heritage conservation district. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could ask for a point of clarification, if my memory doesn't serve me right, if Mr. Basic might clarify that he did stand in front of the council and tell us that we could form the terms of reference for the secondary plan, or have I just dreamt it up in my mind? If I could ask. Mr. Basic is here.
Mr. Basic?
Oh. While we're waiting, oh, there we go ahead.
Oh. Thank you. I apologize. I was dealing with something else at the moment. I didn't quite hear the question. Could you repeat it, please?
Oh, thank you. Walter, back in the day when we were discussing the hospital corridor secondary plan back in the early council on this term, did you not tell us that we could formulate the terms of reference for this secondary plan at this council, or were they already formulated beforehand and we had no control over the terms of reference? my recollection is you told us we could. Am I right or wrong? So if my memory serves me wrong, I apologize, but I just wanted a point of clarification from you.
Yeah, the terms of reference were established through you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. The terms of reference were established. Basically, what I said is
They were established.
Yeah, they were established. And what I did say is that the contents of the secondary plan would have been driven by this council, the new council. So the new council would have determined what should or should not be in the secondary plan in terms of density, in terms of height, in terms of whatever other policies were proposed by the consultants ultimately. This council would have had an opportunity to approve or not approve any provisions within that secondary plan. So it was completely within this council's control, again, subject to the normal planning procedure, which includes potential for appeals and whatnot. So that was what I stated. With respect to Councillor Bothwell's statement of built heritage and what was actually in the terms of reference, built heritage doesn't refer to just designated or listed properties. It refers to all built forms, and whether or not they're listed or designated or not designated, there is built heritage within the community that's not either listed or designated, but it's still built heritage. So my recollection of the background studies that were being done included properties that weren't listed or designated in the background study. So it was clear to me that built heritage referenced what was actually on the ground, not whether or not it was actually designated or listed. Thank you.
If I might just add to other comments, and that is that I'm not sure what happens in other communities with secondary plans and heritage buildings being torn down, but I don't understand that I don't see and understand that we have a threat at this point with any of our heritage buildings at this time. In fact, it looks like we've saved one, and that's the Burgess property. But again, I think we're trying to do this to stop the development of condos. And again, we're weaponizing heritage when we should just have a clear vision that we want to protect our heritage, and it's got nothing to do with condos. And I've never said I supported 5-story condos on Main Street East, but because I'm opposed to the direction we're going with this Heritage District study does not imply that I'm promoting. I'm clear about that. I have a different view. Doesn't make me pro 5-story condos. Thank you.
See, Councillor Cadwell. Wait, Councillor Cadwell.
Councillor Vardy had her hand up before me, so she can speak, then I'll speak after. I'm okay with that.
They're both at third rounds, so deny. All right, go ahead, Councillor Cadwell, then Councillor Vardy.
Mayor Jordan, point of order. I thought we were only allowed to speak twice to a matter. Some councillors have spoken twice, if not more already on some matters. Just a point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. So the question's been called. So
just a point of clarity then, Mr. Mayor, that
yes.
And if this is voted down, we will be able to accept staff's report and vote, right? That comes after this, correct?
It does come after this. I prefer the HCD first because it does protect heritage in a proper way. So hopefully we pass this. Moved by Councillor Bothwell or Vardy, second by Councillor Bothwell. Resolved that CEP 20-03 Heritage Grimsby Advisory Council endorsement package dated December 21st, 2020 be approved. A recorded vote.
Councillor Bothwell,
Yes.
Counselor Dunstone,
No.
Counselor Frake,
Yes.
Counselor Cadwell,
Nope.
Counselor Ritchie,
No.
Counselor Vane,
No.
Counselor Vardy,
Yes.
Mayor Jordan.
Yes.
That's a tie, so it's defeated.
Well done, Cadwell.
Point of order. Comment deserves an apology, please.
Fair point of order there.
Yes, definitely.
That you're
Councilor
gonna allow
Vardy, you need an
If I-
apology.
If I may, I apologize to Counselor Cadwell. I thought I was on mute.
that on record.
Yes, I want my apology on record. Thank you.
Moving to number 9, report PA 20-27, Main Street East proposed study bylaw. Is that where we are? Heritage Country and Heritage Conservation District. Who's going to speak? Antonetta? Antonetta?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. First, I want to start off by sharing something very serious. Councillors are putting out false information, making accusatory statements regarding staff's opinions and what has and has not happened. And as I am sitting here in this meeting, I am receiving threats and unwanted emails from members of the public. It seems to me that staff is also proposing an HCD and has been. And so I don't understand the disconnect or the negativity that is happening here in front of me. But I just want to alert you that the misinformation and the falsehoods that are being put out there can lead to staff dealing with very serious consequences that may actually jeopardize our safety. So I want to put that out there and say that is not appreciated. Now I'll take a deep breath and I'll start my presentation. Thank you.
Can I just add that I have also
First
been
off,
subject to that?
sorry, I will start. Sorry. Did I-
Yeah,
Can I ask
unfortunately,
for a 5-minute recess?
yes,
What we
I'm happy.
wanted to
I'm
start
happy
by
with
saying
having
was
a
that we want to
5-minute.
set a tone for collaboration with both council and the community. We want to work together on protecting our heritage. It's incredibly important to all of your planning staff, to the community, and we know to all of council. So staff has prepared sorry? Oh, they want us to take a break. Okay, we'll take a short recess, I understand. Okay.
Yeah, if we take a 5-minute recess, please.
Yes, council will recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
We'll be back at 10:25. All right, welcome back to the public. Our recess is over. We're on report PA 20-27. Antonetta, your presentation.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Mr. Mayor, councillors, members of the committee, and members of the public tuning in this evening. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on the Main Street East proposed Heritage Conservation District. So as I was saying earlier, I can't seem to move the slides. Next slide. We wanted to set a tone for collaboration. Let's work together. We can always accomplish more together. Staff has preferred recommendation is that a heritage conservation district be paired with other planning instruments as well as a demolition control bylaw. We will take some time to go through why we've outlined these options and why together we think they form the absolute strongest way to protect the cherished area of Main Street East. I would also like to offer that staff are obligated by the ethics of their profession and by our commitment to this community to evaluate all options and recommend, in our professional opinion, the best solutions for the community. Next slide, please. A proposed study bylaw was presented on October 6 to the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. Staff does not recommend the proposed study bylaw. Here are the reasons why. The proposed boundary lacks consistency. There is limited rationale offered for the proposed boundary. Public consultation did not happen on the boundary, at least not that we're aware of. We want to establish, and it proposed to establish an interim heritage conservation study area for a period of 1 year. It increased the town's exposures to appeals and may preclude future studies. In fact, the Heritage Toolkit says that the purpose of interim controls is to protect the integrity of the area while a study is underway. Interim control measures are in effect for a maximum period of 1 year. The municipality will not be able to extend the study area interim control bylaws beyond 1 year. The controls are subject to appeals, which can delay the completion of the study. Also, the municipality cannot pass another bylaw to designate another study area, which includes a previously designated study area, for a 3-year period. We're commenting on this bylaw because this is what we were directed to do by council, but we're also comment on the new bylaw put forward by the committee. So it should be clear that Heritage Committee no longer recommends this proposed study bylaw. We also would like to note that town staff shared all materials with town legal counsel, and at the time, having the information that they had, they offered the following. The town has received legal advice that an approach using multiple tools available to the municipality under the Ontario Heritage Act and the Planning Act, combined with a thorough public consultation process, is likely to produce the most defensible regime in the event of an appeal. Next slide, please. Then on December 8th, at our Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, a new study bylaw was put forward. The boundary was amended to now include West Lincoln Memorial Hospital and excludes 34 properties adjacent to Main Street East. Previously, it had excluded 30. It also removes the Heritage Conservation Study Area interim controls, so we will have no say over what happens between now and when the study is complete and the designation is put into effect, presumably. Staff also provided all the materials to town legal counsel. It should be noted that the materials were given to staff that evening, right at the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. Legal counsel is present and on the Zoom call with us this evening, should council wish to ask for their opinion. Next slide, please. Heritage conservation districts. Heritage districts can work really well. They require strong community support, and a focused area with a high concentration of heritage resources usually works best. Based on the benchmarking that we've completed across Ontario, the average heritage conservation district takes between 3 and 7 years to establish a district from the beginning of the study area to the actual implementation. That is why we deem it critical that we have immediate tools. It is true that once an HCD is approved by council, it cannot be amended unless by council. However, an applicant can appeal on an application by application basis. Furthermore, it should be noted that appeals can happen for each individual parcel being included in the district, and also the district and the guidelines as a whole. We also noted in our report a note on heritage conservation more generally. We don't make these notes to discourage a heritage conservation district. In fact, the opposite. We want to be prepared for everything that we may face as we move forward. And so staff have noted that heritage conservation is under threat with the changes to Bill 108. We have seen language change from shall to should. We have seen other changes that are very concerning. We wrote a report proactively to this council putting forward our concerns with the proposed bill and received multiple supports from communities across Ontario for what we put forward in terms of expressing our concern with Bill 108. That was a staff initiated report. Insurance concerns have also arisen. Our staff attended a session on put on by the National Trust of Canada on insurance becoming harder and harder for designated property owners. In fact, we field calls like this all the time. Now, insurance companies are now looking to save costs, and they're looking at, potentially not insuring heritage buildings. Now, can you still get insurance? Absolutely. Is it becoming more difficult? Yes. Staff's intent is to actually prepare tools to help owners of designated or old buildings get insurance In fact, we have a memo prepared that will be going to our January Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee on what tools we can put in place to help our property owners. But we would be remiss if we did not bring these changes and concerns and changes in the field of heritage forward so that we could proactively prepare for them and help our community instead of being reactive to the changes. Next slide, please. There are many benefits to the comprehensive approach being proposed by staff. First, we need to apply the best tools possible to achieve the best outcomes for the community. An HCD is a good start, but it's not enough for Main Street East. Our community wants more. We've seen this through the countless public engagement that occurred as part of that original secondary plan. What we heard from our community were sorted into key areas: town character and heritage, healthy community, parking and traffic management, walkable and bike-friendly community, and shopping options. So knowing all of this from our community, we definitely need something that is more comprehensive in nature. Planning Act tools also hold more weight at LPAT hearings, as opposed to an HCD alone. If we had an HCD paired with a Planning Act tools, we would stand a much better chance defending any potential appeals. And oftentimes, if you do research, heritage conservation districts can get stuck at LPAT for a long time before they're implemented. So all we're simply advocating for is more tools, not less, for this very important area. I'll also say that staff again are proposing an HCD plus a demolition control bylaw to help us in the interim while the HCD gets sorted out and put into place, Planning Act tools, and fundamental to everything we do going forward, community engagement. Next slide, please. Together, let's get it right. All of these tools work together. Now, you might be tempted to pull these tools apart or choose one over the other, but we actually need to do them holistically to ensure they work for the community. Demolition control will be temporary, and it prevents homes from being demolished without replacement plans in place. This is really key because it can apply to properties that are currently not on our register, neither listed nor designated. Those replacement plans for what goes there can be guided by Planning Act tools and HCD. So the three of these tools are interconnected, and together, holistically, they will address the Main Street East area and the wants and desires of our community, including the strong preservation of heritage. The combination of tools is really the strongest way to protect heritage. Next slide, please. We know that heritage is very important to our community. It's very important to each and every one of your planners here on staff. We take our commitments to heritage preservation very seriously. We also know and have been advocating that Main Street is vulnerable. It lacks strong OP policies and can benefit from a variety of tools available to us under both the Ontario Heritage Act and the Planning Act. We would be remiss to not put these out for council and the community's consideration. Staff, in that vein, and in the light of protecting heritage, have developed a comprehensive solution that we think addresses everything that our community has told us and everything that we've heard from council, as well as the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. It's more, not less. It strengthens our position going forward. And we're hoping it can also unify our community, that heritage is important to all of us, but we need to look at it comprehensively. We've put the Grimsby Beach land use study as a good example. Arguably, some incredible heritage resources in this area. And what we're doing there is a strong heritage component that's part of a land use study. The boundary started off inclusive of everything, but it's being changed, and changes are proposed by the community. Community engagement has been foundational to how we're doing the work and moving forward. They're a key part of how that land use study and what tools we're going to use take shape. And we've also received exceptional feedback from the 2 local area councillors and the community members involved in the study. This is the way in which we'd like to work with our community, collaboratively, using all the tools at our disposal, irrespective of what act they come from, and doing everything we can to protect the character of Grimsby that makes it unique and makes it such a desirable place to actually contribute to the planning function here in our community. That, in summary, is what we wanted to share this evening. The rest is included in much more detail in our report, and we hope that you have had a chance to read that, and we are happy to take on any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Antonetta. Councillor Bain.
Thank you very much, Antonetta. I appreciate that very much. A couple of things. First of all, I just want, if you wouldn't mind, Antonetta, I mean, I'm well aware, as are most of the members of council, aware of your background and your award-winning background as a heritage planner. Maybe you could just quickly just give us an idea of your experience in this area, just to, educate the public a little bit who may not be aware of your background. And then I have another comment after that. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Bain. I will offer that to the community if it helps. I was trained as a heritage planner. I wrote my thesis on the economics of heritage planning while doing my master's, and that focused on the John Street Roundhouse in Toronto. I also contributed to the study that Councillor Bothwell often refers to, the work of Robert Shipley. I contributed directly to the study Heritage Conservation Districts work. I studied under Dr. Robert Shipley. I've managed and created heritage districts. I've contributed to districts in my former communities where I have worked. I also oversaw the implementation and all heritage permits related to a district for over a decade, and it was one of the first districts in Ontario. I have seen firsthand what could go wrong with districts and what could go well, and I think that's what really makes us proud about what we put forward. It addresses all those potential pitfalls. Additionally, I sat on the board of directors for the Ontario Association of Heritage Planners. I'm part of that network. I could go on. I don't want to boast. I think those are some of the highlights of what I've done in my career. Also, we won several awards from CHO, Community Heritage Ontario, the National Trust for the restoration of an old train station. And I, have been project manager for the restoration of key buildings in my former community. They also had an environmental slant to them in that they were geothermal. And we also adaptively reused them and made sure that they were financially viable so that they wouldn't cost the taxpayers too much money going forward. So that's just a glimpse of some of the things that I've done and been a part of. And I am a full certified member of the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, Antonetta. You must be a real treat at an interview when you start going through your qualifications. Set all aside quite a bit of time just to listen to it all. I'm proud and pleased that we have you on our side and in the town of Grimsby to help us through this, because no matter what any of us have read or that, we don't have the experience you do. So thank you and your team very much for everything. The last comment I want to make is kind of a generic one to some members of the community, I guess, is that this was a tough decision for all of council to make. Contrary to what may have been pushed out there by some people, all of us are very interested in our heritage. All of us very much want to protect the heritage. But I know that a lot of people have said things like, with COVID fatigue and all this other stuff, that we've changed a little bit, but it doesn't give anybody any rights. And please be aware, because I do know that there were some threats made as well against a business owner and so on and so forth. That's not acceptable under any situation. I'm telling you, as a federal officer with 30 years experience, if you threaten somebody, whether in writing or on the phone, your calls can be traced, your emails can be traced, and you could face criminal charges. Please remember, we are all just doing jobs. We're not here to take on personal battles. The staff are hired to do their job. The councillors are doing what we believe to be best for the town, whether that agrees with you or not.
Councillor Bain, I think you're fading far from the topic at hand right now. I understand your concern, and I agree with you completely. Yeah, and I think you've said your piece, and I agree, and I think everyone here does. And just repeating is just let's just move on and talk about what's at hand. It's getting late. As you said, I think no good decisions are made after 11. So, Councillor Cadwell.
Yes.
There we are. Thank you, Mayor Jordan, and through you to Antonetta. Thank you very much for the very informative, comprehensive report. to do with the study. Just a question I do have, and maybe I missed it, and if I did, I apologize. How often is public consultation with the community as we move forward? And I'm not trying to, I apologize if I'm putting the cart before the horse here, because not knowing exactly how the process is going to work, but there is a lot of public consultation through this. Will there be, Antonetta? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could answer, a heritage conservation district only requires one formal public consultation session. However, it is highly recommended that you undertake multiple sessions. Given that the success of heritage conservation districts and heritage conservation generally revolves around community support and community understanding, it would be staff's recommendation, and we would build it into whatever future RFP should council approve, that be a key component of what we do going forward. Just like, again, we're doing with the Grimsby Beach community, and maybe using those successes there as not only a model, but maybe even something to build on further.
Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I'm just, I appreciate the amount of work that staff did put into this report, and I appreciate their knowledge and the experience that they're bringing to it. I just need some clarification, please, on how your recommendations here include that staff be directed to proceed with an RFP for the retention of a consulting firm to prepare a comprehensive strategy for the Main Street East area, and that they proceed with an HCD only if it's paired with a land use strategy for the Main Street East area, and that staff be directed to return to council with the option set out by the consultant with the boundary, and a project manager be hired. So a couple of questions are, what are your proposed costs for the consultant and the project manager? How do you propose to include an HCD into this planning strategy or study? At what point in the planning strategy or study will you be invoking the Part 5? And will you be invoking the interim control bylaw section of Part 5 as part of that? Because you say only if it's paired with a more comprehensive plan. I'm just trying to understand your time frame and how you intend to incorporate it, an HCD, into your planning study and your time frame. Because an HCD and the study that we were originally proposing from the committee was also to embrace significant public engagement and consultation, which is part of the study. Although only one public meeting is required, that certainly would not have been the intention. So I think it's fair to say that that would have been a very comprehensive study as well. So I just wonder how you're going to incorporate that amount of depth of an HCD study into this particular proposal that you have.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Staff haven't done the investigation into how we're going, or the detail of combining these two, because we didn't know what council's outcome would be. We could certainly outline that for you in a future report. In terms of the cost of the HCD, Councillor Bothwell, you have provided us some examples of Whitby and other municipalities that we personally called to see how those are going, to see what size theirs is compared to ours. Certainly the size of the boundary will very much dictate many of the costs. So our goal was to at least just give them some general parameters, not identify any parcels, but say we have the Main Street East corridor and we need it to be addressed. What would be the best way to do that, and what would be the most defensible boundary? So I think that was part of our goal. And then the other thing was the planning study is also DC eligible. So the costs in terms of that, in terms of the taxpayers, should not be at all significant. In fact, the planning component of this will be 90% recoverable, as told to us by our Watson consultants, Nancy Neal. So I think the cost of that the DC piece factors into the overall cost. So we could certainly do an analysis. We did mention a project manager in a previous report. Planning staff is at capacity. We want this to move quickly so that we have something in place, not quickly ever at the expense or detriment of the project, but we want it to have a dedicated resource. And that's why when we came to Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, our report indicated that should we move forward, a project manager might be appropriate just to keep it going in an expeditious manner, because we know the community wants to see us move on this, as we know council wants to see something delivered here as well. So I hope that that answers some of your questions.
It doesn't really, because I didn't really get the time frame or how you're going to incorporate the time frame for the HCD. I want to be reassured that the language will be such in the study that it incorporates an HCD from the beginning of the process for the corridor, and that the study component is under either section 40 brackets 1 or 40.1 brackets 1 of the OHA. I don't just want a study that says we're going to incorporate, the guy's going to look at it, or the consultant will look at the Main Street East corridor and then come back and recommend whether we should even do an HCD study. I just am understanding if we're going to get a commitment to an HCD study at the beginning, on the outset of this plan that you're proposing under the Act, and that the definition of the boundary is to incorporate it initially to look at the full Main Street East corridor, which was originally proposed, and from there define whether or not the full area is a candidate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our goal or our intent was to bring forward the demolition control bylaw and look into the options that can afford us, while also launching the HCD, and then we would move forward to the planning instruments. But what we can commit to is that as we draft the RFP to move things forward, we can circle back with the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. We'd be happy to do that and ensure that the language is satisfactory with them as well, and use their input into that piece. But yes, the goal is for an HCD and the demolition control pieces more immediately, and then a planning or a land use study would follow.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just am a little frustrated that we could have got where we are right now by passing the original bylaw that I had, which was to start an HCD, and then for planning staff to coordinate it with the secondary plan, either in conjunction or following, because we certainly could have done those in conjunction had the original bylaw been passed. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're prepared to move forward with an HCD for the Main Street East corridor, the study, to start at the beginning of the process. And the demolition permit thing, section 33, I just want to understand, because there's changes to that too under Bill 108. And there's changes now that require a council to issue a permit, or it's appealable within 30 days. So there's a really tight timeline on that new demolition permit language in the Act as well. And you were talking about delegating that anyway to planning staff and not having it come to council. So I just don't understand how the demolition permit, I think in your report says that it would be planning staff that would be the ones that issue those permits. Is that correct?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, we did not say that we would delegate that authority to planning staff. If we have, if it's in the report, we would happily look at that. But to my knowledge, we did not state that. The other piece is we've asked that we bring forward a report on the demolition control bylaw, a proposed demolition control bylaw. We still need to look into it. We need to look into the changes. But, you know, I'm fairly certain I have the report in front of me. And if you have something, we'd be happy to look at that. But we did not state that we would have delegated authority over demolition control.
Okay.
Can you confirm that that's not in the report, please? Or that you found it and you'd like us to address it?
I found it that planning could. I can go and try and find it here again under the demolition section. I read that and I just thought that was interesting because the Planning Act states council will. And it says in your report, allows municipalities to help must obtain a demolition permit. Oh, here it is. The bylaw could be designed so that the planning department must approve the request for demolition before a demolition permit can be issued by the building department. So you did say the bylaw could be designed so the planning department must approve the request, not council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it could be, and that a future report outlining everything will come forward to council for their approval, but we're not recommending that be the course of action. It's just that the Planning Act tells you that it can either be your planning department or council. And so we were just listing off what's available there, but we're not recommending one way or another. That would all be subject to council's approval in a future report.
What's your time frame for starting this? I appreciate that you're talking about coming back to Heritage with the RFP, because I think it's really important that council and committee, Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee, considering that they have to be consulted on any study under the OHA anyway. So that I appreciate that it will come back to Heritage Committee for review, as well as to council. So what's your timeline for that, Antonetta?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the timeline question is a little premature. We didn't know what was going to happen, whether or not we'd have a resolution, what would be the direction for staff, and we still don't have direction yet. So I think we'll need to take that back and knowing what the outcome of this meeting is. So it'd be very premature for us to answer that. But certainly, as I said, we've listed it as a priority, and that's why we suggested hiring a dedicated project manager, so that it's not something that happens from the side of our desk, but that we have a person who their main responsibility is to drive this forward, so that we can do so in a timeline that is agreeable and is also moves things along quickly. And I think the councillors, hopefully who are involved in Grimsby Beach will also attest that that is also moving along rather nicely as well. But again, it would be premature. We don't even know what the recommendation from council at this point is. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really looking forward to the component of consultation with the public. I can't speak for Councillor Frake, but we are the two councillors that sit on what's happening in the Grimsby Beach area. And all I've received so far is praise about the consultation that's happening with the public and getting their engagement and getting their input as to what's going to work in that area. So I want to thank you. And if this study moving forward is anything in that same direction, we can look forward to some fantastic things. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. I have some questions, Antonetta. So as I understand it, the HCD study would not only look at the existing heritage components.
If we have to, right?
Sorry.
We'll just interrupt.
Would not only look at the existing heritage components, but would also ensure that what gets proposed to be built fits in with the existing heritage landscape. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would not be uncommon for a heritage conservation district to outline design guidelines, parameters for new development, ensuring that it's sympathetic and contributes to the character and doesn't detract from the character. So yes, that could entirely be designed into the process. And it's very common for an HCD to do that.
All right, because my concern, and I know Councillor Dunstall has talked about weaponizing heritage district studies, but the residents of Ward 2 are concerned about what's being proposed right now at Main and Nellis and also on the Coles property. And I'd like to know what tools you can suggest or that you would use to not stop development there, but to make sure that the development that is put there fits in with the established residential community. Can you speak to that, please?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's why staff was proposing alternatives, and even 2 years ago, they addressed the fact that the area was very weak on policies. So we don't have a lot of policies. What we can do right now before these pieces come into play is rely on what we have in the OP and rely on whatever tools that are at our disposal. Unfortunately, right now, immediately, we will not have a heritage conservation district in place. That will take some time. We are looking again, as we've said to council, an urban design review component, and we will use everything that we have. We can also ask for heritage impacts assessments, and we have, and they can speak to compatibility pieces as well. So we'll use the heritage impact assessments as our tool to make sure that it's compatible development. And certainly we can get it peer reviewed to ensure that the recommendations are appropriate. And in the interim, one of our other strategies that we've mentioned to the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee is an increase in Part 4 designations. I understand that as a community, we haven't done a lot of them. Our commitment is to increase those Part 4 designations, but that is going to be an interim tool. Again, if in some scenarios, it could take 3 to 7 years. That's why we really felt that we needed an interim strategy to address it. And part of that is the demolition control bylaw, subject to a future report and council's approval. And part of that is Part 4 as well. So those are the tools that we can use right now. In the future, should things go well and council approve the types of tools that we're talking about, we'll have an array of tools that we can use to ensure that we have sensitive, compatible development that respects the heritage of the area. In the meantime, we're going to work to the very best of our ability with the tools and mechanisms that we do have in place and the triggers that we have through planning instruments and things of that nature.
All right, so my understanding with the hospital corridor study, the one that we elected not to pursue, I specifically asked if we could change the terms of reference. And at the time I was told, no, we would not be allowed to do that. Sorry, Antoinette, are you listening? I just see you talking to someone else.
Yes, I'm listening.
Thank you. So, and that hospital corridor study would have allowed, I mean, I think it was premised on medium density or something like that with mixed use, which would have allowed the kinds of 7-story apartment buildings and, condominium, 5-story condominiums that the community in this area do not want to see. So, given that we couldn't change the terms of reference, we really had no option but to sort of abandon that work. It concerns me when you talk about a 3 to 7 year time horizon when we've got some immediate pressures, which are those 2 areas that I've identified. So I guess, I would like some clarity on, for you to share what kind of discussions you've had with the region about intensification on Main Street.
Councillor Vardy, I'm just going to get you to continue with your process after we move. We need a motion to extend right now.
Okay.
So mover and seconder to extend past 11. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that the council meeting of December 21st extend beyond 11 p.m. All in favor? And that's carried. All right, continue, Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. So, Antoinette, if you can share with me the discussions that you've had with the region about intensification, particularly in terms of what the region is requesting or suggesting and what you are suggesting in response. If I could get an answer to that, and if I could also get an answer to this question that I keep hearing about a parking garage on Main Street East, where I understand they're from a developer that that's in the plan. And maybe you could, or that there's discussions for it, or there's been some interest in it. Perhaps you could expand on that, because, unless there's a huge amount of intensification on Main Street East, I certainly don't see a need for, or that it be desirable to have a parking garage, a 5-story parking garage on Main Street East. So if you could address those, I would really appreciate that.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start with the first one, the hospital secondary plan and the terms of reference. I believe that question was asked earlier and Walter answered that. The reason I was conferring with staff was just to confirm that I wasn't a part of this organization at that time. And while I've looked into it, I think Walter answered that question. If we wanted to answer it again, I'm happy to ask Walter to answer the hospital secondary plan terms of reference piece. Councillor Vardy, do you want that answered?
Well, what I want answered is to know what it would have allowed, because my understanding is it would have allowed the kind of development that's currently being proposed. So, you know, if I could get a yes or no answer to that, that would be very helpful. And then the next question is all of this stuff about a parking garage, which I understand.
Well, I have 4 questions. I have the hospital secondary plan, the HCD 3 to 7 years. I have the region's growth numbers, and then the parking garage. So
No,
I'll
that's
just ask.
not- If I could just clarify, I'm not asking about the region's growth numbers. I'm asking about what kinds of discussions you have had with the region about intensification on Main Street East, and sort of what's the tenor, what kinds of heights are you talking? What kind of densities are you talking? That's really important for the community to know.
So I'll start, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer the questions that I can answer, that I'm best suited to answer, and then I'll have my colleagues answer the balance. The HCD question about the 3 to 7 years, that's not how long staff is projecting this HCD will take. That's what our benchmarking did. So we reached out to the Ontario Association Heritage Planners, our network. We have an email network, and we looked at how long it took from the launch of the study to the actual implementation of the district. There were some outliers that were actually longer than 7 years, but the average that we found was 3 to 7 years. That number was also concerning for us, which is why we felt that we needed to come up with an interim strategy or some parallel strategies that could be implemented more quickly. In addition to a potential demolition control bylaw, there's also different official plans, policies that we could look at, perhaps an OPA or urban design guidelines to address the area. So we are concerned about those timelines as well. And what we'd like to create is some interim parallel strategies. In terms of discussions with the region on Main Street East, the answer to that question, we have had no discussions, none whatsoever with the region on the intensification of Main Street East. We did bring forward a report updating where we were with the growth numbers. And then we also sent out an email late last week, I believe, indicating that the region told us the earliest they'd be ready to share their numbers with us and bring those numbers forward to council would be the end of January, the beginning of February. We shared that via our senior planner in an email to all of council last week. In terms of the parking garage and the 7 stories, those are not discussions that have any status or that we are aware of having any status. Certainly, you know, developers can put forward anything they want, but everything has to come to council and for your approval. And so we haven't seen anything formal. There have been no applications made to council, including anything of a 5-story parking garage or a 7-story residential building. So those are the answers to those questions.
But we have a plan right now for a 7-story apartment building. There's an application right now that Mr. Lusani has talked about openly in public. So I don't understand why
you... Sorry, through you, I thought you said that would be one paired with a 5-story parking garage.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so my apologies. Yes, the Lusani application, like I said, it's been made. We just declared it a complete application, I think last week, Thursday or Friday. So now all the ingredients are in for us to actually start reviewing the application. So the Lusani piece is one that is known, hopefully, and if not, once we just declared that complete last week. So there's that piece, and then the parking garage, we have no knowledge of a formal application for a 5-story parking garage. Sorry that I combined them. I thought you said that they were combined. My apologies.
Do you have knowledge of informal discussions about a parking garage?
There are discussions with community members about parking garages, about different plans for all of the community. I mean, there's different developers have different plans on Main Street East.
On Main Street East.
No, not on Main Street East.
Thank you.
To our knowledge.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Antonetta, for the presentation. First, I'll just respond to Councillor Ritchie's comments earlier. Yes, I am happy, and I only hear positive comments on the study at the beach. It is a different study, of course, but yes, I mean, so far, everything has been very positive, and I'm quite pleased as a councillor as to what's going on with that study. So moving on from there, Antonetta, I know that, I don't know, did you mention cost attached to this particular consultant and related to this particular going down the road we're going now? I mean, I don't know if you maybe you did, I just didn't hear it. Did you mention cost or what it's going to cost us to go down this road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't mentioned financial implications in the report. You'll find a statement there from the treasurer saying that financial implications will be addressed once we get a recommendation from council. What I did say is that anything that is Planning Act or planning study related will be about 90% recoverable through our DCs. So that was the financial piece. We also mentioned a project manager, in particular in the draft report that went to the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. We did put a value to that, I think between $50,000 and $100,000 at that time. But for this report, because we didn't know where it was going to go, what tools might be selected by council, we said we'll have to come back to council with costs or projected costs because we just didn't know what was going to be the outcome of this meeting.
Next question is, will going down the road we're going with if we pass this particular report of yours tonight, is it going to delay this particular Main Street East study at all? A week, a month, a year, 6 months? I mean, is there going to be any type of delay in there whatsoever? Where things might just sneak under the radar and developers will start filing applications before we get a chance to kick this particular study off?
Yeah, so it should be noted that there are already significant development applications in for this area. So that what we do going forward, unfortunately, won't retroactively go back to those ones. So I would like to note that. In terms of the timeline, that's why we are recommending that a project manager be retained so that, again, staff aren't doing this from the side of their desk, but it's a priority. It's someone's main responsibility to drive this forward, to move it forward in an expeditious manner.
But wouldn't the applications that are currently filed go on some type of a hold pattern? If we had gone with the original idea of going straight ahead with the heritage study endorsement that we just voted down?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, happy to stand to be corrected. However, the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee removed the the interim control. It's not interim control bylaw, but it's what is considered interim control under the Ontario Heritage Act. They actually removed that recommendation from their new bylaw. So no hold or controls would have been set in place for the next year.
Okay. I've got another question. I'm going to direct it to, I see Tom Malinsky is still wide awake, hanging in there. Sorry, Tom, to keep you up so late. Now that you've listened to all of the arguments on both sides in the debate, what would you have recommended we go, which way we should have gone with? Should we have gone with the original resolution / bylaw, or should we have gone down the road of what staff is offering us right now? I mean, can you give us some insight as to what you think in your background and your experience?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer that question, and I will answer it. And if council would like additional detail, I'm happy to suggest that you may wish to go into closed session to receive additional advice.
Let's just keep it high level for this conversation.
Thank you. It's been my consistent input into this report, and I don't think that's telling tales out of school, that the fuller the range of tools that council decides to proceed with, the better the objective that council, as I understand it, is seeking to accomplish, the better a chance it has of being accomplished. One of the things, and the reason that I originally turned on my camera in the first place, it was other than to indicate that I was happy to answer any questions, but to mention that if council wishes to proceed with the staff recommendations, there's a number of ways of doing that. One of them is to stagger them. Another is to proceed in parallel fashion. And in fact, there are ways of incorporating the study processes or combining the study processes so they proceed together. And what I mean by that is Section 40 of the Ontario Heritage Act, for example, when it speaks to the scope of a study under Section 40, it also indicates that a study of that sort can, and in fact, I think it's actually required to, even though the bylaw before you doesn't speak to that specifically, make recommendations as to any changes that will be required to the municipality's official plan and to any municipal bylaws, including any zoning bylaws. So, that goes to the point that these are not mutually exclusive tools, but in fact they're designed to work together. Now, at the end of the day, it's up to council which and how many of the tools it decides to employ. But the legislation envisions that they can, and in my respectful view, ought to work together. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor. I'm happy to expand on that.
Kinda. I was asking you to choose between the two. Which one would be the better way to have gone to make sure this happens faster, sooner rather than later?
And I think what I'm trying to say is that I don't know that you need to choose. And I think that if you're simply looking at speed, then I guess the fewer tools, the better, strictly from the perspective of speed. But at the end of the day, that may not get to the goal that council is trying to accomplish. And combining the processes is likely to get to that goal much, if not necessarily with any particular delay, but certainly with a lot more force, I would say.
Thanks for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell.
Just one quick last question, please, for Antonetta. Speaking again to our legal counsel's point here and our previous initial bylaw, which was to incorporate the interim control part of it, considering the risk to the Main Street corridor. Do you see, as part of your proposal and recommendations, you're saying that council proceed with that in HCD only if it's paired with the land use strategy, so working concurrently or in parallel, do you see implementing an interim control bylaw portion to your recommendation as well, or not?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we are open to that. We may in fact want to invoke those protections both under the Heritage Act, and then depending on the planning instrument that we choose, we would also have the ability to do it under that act as well. So both under the Ontario Heritage Act and potentially under the Planning Act. We've sought legal counsel on that, and they should not be considered mutually exclusive. So we may actually be able to pair those, and that's what makes this a fairly strong strategy as well. And Tom, if you wanted to jump in there and offer your advice on that as well, should council find that favorable, I'd be welcome to that as well.
So I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. I'm in your hands. Thank you. That's correct. The tools are not mutually exclusive. The one caution that I would place on that is that they are time limited. So we've taken to calling an interim control bylaw under section 40.1 of the Heritage Act, which is a 1 year in duration, and ICBL, an interim control bylaw under the Planning Act, is also 1 year and can be extended a further year. And so the timing of those needs to be considered carefully, because there is then a 3-year cooling off period on the municipality enacting another instrument with the same effect in the same area.
Thank you. So Antonetta, that will come in the RFP, or that'll come in further correspondence to council, those recommendations or those considerations as well will come forward back to us?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly include those in the RFP, that we would want those tools used if we could in a strategic or timely manner when it makes sense in the process. But I would also like to tell council those can be appealed. We'll just have to be prepared to deal with those appeals and ensure that everything that we're doing is defensible. You know, we get concerned when we hear the word stop development. We don't want to use that as the reason for using these tools. We need to really apply it in a fair, consistent, in a way that makes sense. So yes, we can mention the use of both the interim control pieces under the Heritage Act and the Planning Act in our RFP.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I have a question to, I guess, to staff and maybe to Antonetta. In this report, in number 3A, it says that staff be directed to proceed with an RFP for the retention of a consulting firm to prepare a comprehensive strategy for the Main Street East area generally. So when it's talking about just a general area, so in the past, the motion, the bylaw that came from Heritage that Councillor Bothwell participated in, that one had a map, and like, so I've been declaring conflict of interest because my parents live on Main Street East, and they have a development application that was approved by this council in 2019, and so I've been declaring conflict of interest. But this sounds like it's more general to the area of Main Street East. Can you just confirm what that means when it says a strategy for Main Street East generally?
So I think what we want to do there, through you, Mr. Mayor, is not to preclude any other ideas that maybe staff didn't think about. So we've said a strategy for Main Street East generally. In terms of the geographic area, we found it a little premature for even staff to draw a boundary, including or excluding properties. That said, we recognize that the consultants are going to need some boundaries. So we were thinking just Main Street East in general, between Wentworth and Robinson. Yeah. So that's generally what we were thinking about, to focus it based on the concentration of heritage resources. But again, we didn't want to draw a map including or excluding certain properties. We want to give a general area and then have the consultants tell us what would be the most defensible position moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Because in the past, in March and February of 2020, I participated in budget discussions on including money for this study, and it was speaking generally of a heritage study or a cultural heritage landscape or cultural heritage district for Main Street East, and I voted for that. And then when the bylaw that Councillor Bothwell participated in came to the Heritage Committee, it came with a boundary, and that boundary included first half of my parents' property, and then on the next iteration, it included all of my parents' property. It's where they live, but they do have a development application, and so I feel like, and in the effort to be transparent, I feel like that if this is a general decision asking for a request for a consultant to prepare a strategy for Main Street East, that I can participate in this vote. And I'm not sure, I'm not asking you for advice, but if you would just confirm that this is similar to when we included for the budget in early 2020, this is talking about a general area of Main Street East, as in like an area of town, not the specific to the properties on Main Street East.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't identified any specific parcel fabrics intentionally. So that would come through the consultants eventually. We, again, if asked, our idea was just to identify a general area along Main Street East, and note that no matter what boundary we put forward, that will change. And it should change. It should be like the Grimsby Beach study. You know, our community is saying we want it a little bigger here. It makes more sense there. So it will always be subject to change. But what we would like is that the consultants create what they think would be a defensible boundary for a heritage conservation district. So right now we don't have any parcel fabrics identified, but we are saying that it should be between, our initial thoughts is that it should be between Robinson and Wentworth along Main Street, but we're happy for that to expand or contract, that whatever puts the town in the strongest position moving forward.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, and for the residents that are watching, I am going to participate in this vote. I know I have not participated in the vote at this meeting, and I want them to be aware that if this consultant comes back with an area that does include my parents, that I will declare conflict when I am in conflict. So just to eliminate confusion, I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy?
Thank you. So Antoinette, I'm just a little bit confused. You're saying that if with the HCD that you had proposed, you wouldn't necessarily prescribe an area, maybe give something general and allow the consultant to determine what the boundary should be. Is that correct? So, yes.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we would expect the consultant to make a recommendation on the boundary for the future Heritage Conservation District.
So how is that any different from what was being proposed?
There was a map.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have a map attached to what we're doing, and the map that was accompanying both pieces identified parcel fabrics, and it included and excluded properties that had some sort of visual frontage onto Main Street. And as we've said in both reports and in presentations, we didn't see the rationale for the inclusion or exclusion of those properties. So we don't want to preclude the study area in any way, and we don't want it to be too big or too small. So I think we'll leave it up to the expertise of the consultants. The map was very different because it actually outlined every parcel fabric and said this is going to be included in the proposed study area or excluded. Now, granted, that could have changed moving forward, but there was a study area that had a predetermined boundary for the study area, and should the interim controls have gone in place, it would have applied to the area specified in the attached map.
So Antonetta, why wouldn't that have just been your advice, to eliminate the map and allow the study to go forward? Why wouldn't that have been your advice?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a part of our advice to let the HCD go forward. But what we're saying is that because an HCD can take 3 to 7 years, we need to develop some interim strategies. And we're also saying that the area needs to be planned more comprehensively because our community has asked for things like shopping, biking, walkability, healthy components being built into it. Those are things that typically an HCD cannot do as well as a planning instrument could do. So that's why our advice is as it stands.
But it was never an either or. You know, even as I suggested earlier in the discussion, go with the HCD and then incorporate whatever other tools we need. I just don't understand how we got to such a place of disagreement.
Mr. Mayor, point of order on this. We're starting to get off topic. The HCD by itself was turned down. We're looking at multiple tools here. That's why we're here for the protection and to constantly ask and dig to staff to try and get answers.
Point of order. I'm not digging at staff. I have every right to ask questions.
Then stay on topic.
I can understand and the community can understand. So if you don't mind.
We go to the HCD by itself down, and now we're here using multiple tools to protect the area. I think it's self-explanatory.
I don't think so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can, staff are recommending an HCD. We have that in common with what came forward with the Heritage Grimsby Advisory Committee. We're just adding more parallel strategies and pieces to make it more comprehensive in nature, more defensible, and to have it stand a better chance should any future appeals come forward. That's what we're doing. So there was no disagreement. We agreed that an HCD is a good tool, but it shouldn't be the only tool. And that's what our report outlines, and that's what we were asked to comment on.
Councillor Bothwell, I believe you've spoken twice already, so.
One quick question, just one, last one. It's the same, just asking.
Be voted on.
It's just,
let council vote on it.
I just want to hear a commitment from Antonetta that an HCD study.
Point of order. We said we'd vote on it, please.
Is it recorded? Yeah. Oh, no, are we voting on this or voting on whether this? All right, I guess we're going to vote on the motion, so we need a seconder. Councillor Ritchie? No, you moved it. So I need a seconder.
That's so long.
Councillor Bain. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Bain. Resolved that report PA 20-27 regarding the proposed study bylaw and heritage conservation district for Main Street East be received, and that the land use planning study under the Planning Act be implemented as the tool to comprehensively address the development pressures and the community's vision for the Main Street East area, and that should council wish to proceed with an alternate strategy, staff recommend the following: that staff be directed to proceed with an RFP for the retention of a consulting firm to prepare a comprehensive strategy for the Main Street East area generally, that council proceed with a heritage conservation district only if it is paired with a more comprehensive land use planning strategy for the Main Street East area generally as outlined in this report. 3, that staff be directed to return to council with the options set out by the consultant, including a defensible boundary, and that in order to deliver the projects, it is in an expedited manner, staff be directed to retain a project manager for the file, and that as an interim measure, council directs staff to bring forward a demolition control bylaw report under section 33 of the Planning Act, which can function to protect all built resources across the town and in the Main Street area to protect all potential heritage resources.
And I have a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. As you read the beginning of the motion, it says we recommend this, but if you don't agree, then we recommend all of this. So what are we voting on? The first part of it or the second part of it?
Well,
I don't think it was inclusive. It was the way it's written. It's an either or. If you don't accept
isn't it? Do you
our
think it is? Is
recommendation.
your interpretation of that? The clerk's going to clarify for us.
Thank you.
And it shouldn't say should council wish to proceed.
So what we if the mover and seconder is okay with it, the part that says that should council wish to proceed with an alternate strategy, staff recommend the following. If we take that line out, then what it does is it moves forward with everything in this motion. Antonetta, you wanted to comment?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think if point 3 said that council directs staff to proceed with an alternative strategy, staff recommend the following. Or with the strategy staff recommended.
It says that staff be directed to return to council with the options set out by the consultant, including a defensible boundary. That's point 3.
Point clarification again, Mayor. I think that number 2 can't stand alone. It has to be combined with 3ABC, or 2 has to be removed and only 3 be the recommended alternate strategy, or it has to be voted on separately.
Antonetta?
For you, Mr. Mayor, if it's helpful and we revert to the expertise of the clerk, we could recommend that recommendation 1 stay in, 2 be removed, 3 be written that council directs staff to, and then include the balance of it. And then if you look within 3, it includes it be paired with a comprehensive land use planning strategy. So that would tick off number 2. So it was written as a series of options. So keep 1 in, keep 3 in, reword it that council directs staff to, and then A, B, C, and keep 4 and 5. If the clerk finds that acceptable, but again, we defer to her expertise.
What if we just remove the words "should council wish to proceed with an alternate strategy," and number 3 just says that staff recommend the following?
I think Antonetta made a good point, and I'm supporting her wording, which is to remove 2 and to proceed with 3 with the wording she suggested, 3, 4, and 5. That makes the most sense. Otherwise, you have 2 motions.
I'm okay either way.
Sarah's going to read it. So
that report PA 20-27 regarding the proposed study bylaw and Heritage Conservation District for Main Street East be received, and that council directs staff to 1, the staff be directed to proceed with an RFP for the retention of a consulting firm to prepare a comprehensive strategy for the Main Street East area generally. 2, that council proceed with a Heritage Conservation District only if it is paired with a more comprehensive land use planning strategy for the Main Street East area as outlined in this report. 2, that staff be directed to return to council with the options set out by the consultant, including a defensible boundary, and that in order to deliver the projects in an expedited manner, staff be directed to retain a project manager for the file, and that as an interim measure, council directs staff to bring forward a demolition control bylaw report under Section 33 of the Planning Act, which can function to protect all built resources across the town and in the Main Street area to protect all potential heritage resources.
And a recorded vote's been requested.
Councillor Bothwell?
Yes.
Councillor Dunstall?
Yes.
Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Councillor Cowell?
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie?
Yes.
Councillor Sharp?
Yes.
Councillor Vane?
Yes.
Councillor Vardy?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
That's carried.
Moving on to report 9B, report DRS 20-15, community engagement, bang the table engagement HQ follow-up. Yeah, Sarah, thanks for waiting.
Good evening, Mayor Jordan, members
been a
of
long
council.
today.
I will try to keep it brief as I can appreciate your meetings are long. This is a follow-up report from last week's report for Bang the Table engagement platform. There were a couple of questions that arose out of that report, and so it was deferred. And hopefully this report addresses those questions. I did just want to touch on why we are trying to move this along quickly. And it is because in Q1 of 2021, there's a number of projects coming up that we think really align very well to this platform. Our acting fire chief is hoping to do the open air burning bylaw review. I know our economic development officer is quite eager to use this tool for some business retention and expansion initiatives. Our clerk is hopeful to use it for ward boundary and council composition review. And our treasurer is hopeful to use it for budget 2021 feedback, as well as some other things that we can use it for, some parks design feedback, some recreation service feedback, perhaps even some parking concerns feedback as well that has been discussed. So we see all those things coming up pretty quickly, and it makes it a great opportunity for us to be able to use this type of platform to present those types of projects to the community. The one other thing I did just want to bring to your attention is Philip and I did take this back to the vendor, and we have modified the recommendation slightly in that we're still asking to have this be a renewable annual agreement for a 3-year period, but we are also able to fully opt out of it after year 1 if we wanted to do so for any reason of our choosing, whether it's budgetary, how we think it is being utilized, for any reason at all of our choosing, we can opt out after year 1. And with that, I'll just turn it over for any questions. I know Philip is here as well. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. And thank you, Sarah and Philip, for your report. I was just briefly at Town Hall today, and Sarah Kim, the town clerk, showed me just quickly some of the bang the table. It was in the city of Welland or something, and even just a little bit of a experience with it. It looks good, and I know that our town website, well, it has improved greatly, and thank you, Philip, for doing all the work to that. But it can be difficult to navigate, and I think that just on my short experience with it today, I think it'll be a lot easier for residents to access information that we're trying to get out to them. And I'm happy to hear that we will be able to opt out. The 3-year commitment was kind of something that I was unsure about, but I think this sounds great and I will support it.
Councillor Cadwell.
You're on mute, Councillor Cadwell. It really is the 2020 statement.
Thanks, Sarah.
There we go. Thank you. And through Mayor Jordan, thank you. Yeah, great report. Thank you, Sarah and Philip. Just a question I have, would there be any opportunities from a funding perspective under any of the COVID grants that we've received to assist us in funding for even the first year, if not what might be doable? So that's just my question from a funding perspective, how we could maybe use grants, COVID grants. Thank you.
Sorry, maybe I'll take that one. Well, maybe we'll alternate. I don't know. So, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, the short answer is yes. Certainly, our first report recommended we use COVID, allocate some of the COVID funding for this software platform. In subsequent years, we'll have to see, but definitely for the initial purchase and that 1-year commitment Sarah spoke of.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier on, we had a presentation from our economic development officer, and some of us asked what we could do to help. Well, at one of our last meetings or get-togethers there, I asked some of the people from the GDAC committee to take a look, and I just wanted to read a couple comments. They stated that it will add a level of complexity to the project initially, but definitely short-term payback on the BRNE project. What is really exciting is the opportunity to use this tool as a sustainable BRNE tool for economic development and ongoing. If we were to get Bang the Table, it makes sense to do it now so the business base is built through the project timeline and in place to continue engaging the business community. So I just wanted to speak about this email and the words from some of the GDAC members as we had a presentation from our economic development officer this morning. And this is just one area out of several areas in our town that this tool will have, I believe, a very good payback in regards to what it will be able to help our staff in our town with in regards to communication. So I want to thank you for this report.
Thank you.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for staying up so late, Sarah and Philip. I hate to be the guy called the Grinch, but before I become the Grinch, did I hear you say you could cover this off with some COVID funds?
Yes, that is correct. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. The first year we would be using COVID funds for it. In following years, we'd have to make that determination, but for year 1, yes.
So it won't.
Give you the option of, give you the option of doing that for year one. And then as year one progresses, then, perhaps how you just, you have a chance then to see it in use before we make further budget discussions about it.
Okay, so so it's not going to affect our budget deliberations or our budgets for next year, because it'll come out of that COVID grant or whichever grant you're going to be used. Could that 15,000 be used somewhere else other than, is this the best place for us to put that amount of funds right now? I mean, with this particular software platform? I mean, obviously you've prioritized the COVID funds. And this is the program that you've come out, and I see Harry nodding his head there. So I guess the answer is yes. So my concern was that we were going to be eating it once again into some budget funds, but it sounds like we're not going to be doing that. So that's a good thing. I did look at the program. I think it's great. And I can see where it can be helpful with the economic development and so on and so forth, and for community involvement, I do. My biggest concern was that would have come out of next year's budget, but I'm glad to hear it's not. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I just was expecting maybe a little more detail in this report from what we'd asked for. I don't see any comparison of the per capita and how the 15,000 was arrived at. You did note that Innisfil did get a promotional rate. You mentioned that staff have been made aware of other municipalities with recent purchases of this product that are in line with the fees quoted to the town, but you don't provide any of that information. So I'm a little wondering, because from what I saw initially, ours was quite high compared to the number of residents that we have in the per capita rate that's quoted. I also noticed that a number of the sample municipalities that you provided included a moderator package. So I just wondered what add-ons you have chosen with this package that were not basic, and as well if you've chosen to have it moderated. Thank you.
Philip, I'll give you that one.
Sure, yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Bothwell, we did speak to the vendor around pricing. We recommended a package to council for 1 year. It's the basic package. We did not take any of the add-ons. So, I think that answers your first question. Secondly, the vendor did not did assure us that the pricing was in line with other municipalities. Did not give us details on necessarily what those other municipalities received, as it is apples and oranges at times. For example, some municipalities may choose integration options that are available to them. We recommended to council, we recommended the basic package with no options.
I'm just surprised, Philip, because for the basic package, that's substantially higher than other municipalities with greater population densities than us. If like just from an online, just doing an online Google search of what other municipalities are paying for the same service.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to comment on Councillor Bothwell's question, I am also aware of other municipalities who receive the same pricing as the town of Grimsby. But you're correct, others have lower rates as well. And the vendors keeps that a little close to their vest when we start talking about it.
Okay, so that's just why I just felt that we were kind of missing some information about how you arrived at your pricing, because it isn't in this report. So yeah, I guess if you can't, if you didn't get anything more than that, then that's all we have to go with, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your report, Sarah and Philip. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Cadwell, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that report DRS 20-15 dated December 21st, 2020 be received, and that staff be authorized to enter into agreement with Bang the Table Engagement HQ for the provision of a community engagement platform at an annual cost of $15,000 plus tax, renewable annually for a 3-year period, with the option of opting out after the first year at the discretion of the town. All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to all.
To you too, Philip, and you too, Sarah. All right, so there's no bylaw there, right? What's this one? 9C. All right, we're moving to 9C, and let's report PA 20-26, extension of draft plan approval, 8 Lake Street. Who's going to speak on that one? Walter Basic's going to speak on this one.
Walter's not online.
While we're waiting for Walter, we'll get a mover and seconder for this. Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Bain.
Mr. Mayor, this being only an extension, I think they're only asking for an extension. I don't think there's going to take a lot of dialogue to explain what's in that report. Do we actually need Walter to explain that? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, does anyone want to comment on it before Walter gets on?
I'm willing to vote on it because I mean it does not rocket science when you read this thing. It's very simple, and I don't think we need to pull Walter out of whatever he's doing to explain it to us. That's my thoughts. I'll leave the rest of the council to talk about it.
All right, Councillor Cadwell.
Yeah, I know it's late, but I'd still like to hear something from staff on this. Thank you.
All right, we'll wait.
Could our CAO address this? Seeing as he approved the recommendation.
Well, this CAO is going to speak to it. Hopefully that will satisfy you, Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, I'm sorry, councillors, and Mayor, but yes, Councillor Frake is right. It's just an extension. You know, the development on 8 Lake Street, we've been working on it for a while. I would strongly recommend we approve the extension. We've been working with this resident and developer for some time now. And it's just as per the regulations that you need to come to council for an extension to April. I'm sorry about that.
Councillor Cadwell, did you want to comment or are you happy?
No, thank you, Mayor. I just was wondering if there's any other maybe particulars to it, but yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Ritchie, second by Councillor Bain. Resolved that report PA 20-26 dated December 21st, 2020 be received and the draft plan approval for 8 Lake Street 26T-16-1703 be extended to April 5th, 2021. All in favor? That's carried. Now we're moving to number 15, announcements. I just have a couple. My first one is that I was very happy to sign the fire department employment agreement with the Allingham brothers and Jeff Dancer and Chief Thompson and our assistant HR director, Jillian. It was very nice to see us coming together on that with the fire department. We hadn't had an agreement for a long time, and our volunteer fire department does so much in the town of Grimsby, and having the employment agreement together was just a really nice thing. Our CIO was there as well too, Harry. Sorry to leave you out, but yes, having the agreement that was a long time coming, just to see what our fire department does. And it's just really a proud moment having our volunteer fire department with the reverse parade where they were there out in full force, and then just getting this agreement together and just seeing everything they do. And just on the next note, as everyone well knows, we are moving on Boxing Day at 12:01 a.m. We are moving to the gray zone or lockdown. And that's going to happen for 28 days. So I just want everyone to have a very merry and very safe Christmas and New Year. And on that note, Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I just wanted to quickly add that I participated in the December 16th MPCA floodplain mapping webinar. It was quite interesting. They've mapped some new tributaries or watercourses in Grimsby that have never been mapped before for floodplains, one of them being through the Woodlot. A couple of them that people may be aware of, or there's one actually that runs a tributary that runs right under the hospital and Central Avenue, another one through Queenslawn Cemetery, and there's a large one by Kelson. And the MPCA, the results of that floodplain mapping indicated that there were, I think, 5 areas that required significant improvement or monies to put into to remediate the floodplain concern, some of which would be borne by the private property owners that are impacted by it. And interestingly, one of the properties is the Peller Estates Winery. And the Kelson Road improvements, I think that they recommended in there that required improvements to the culverts and the drainage under the QEW amounted to something like $850,000. So there was 5 or so directly impacted floodplain residences or properties that may require remediation. I'd encourage people to go and read the draft background report. They also mentioned that the MPCA's role is changing, as we know, with the recent legislation that impacted them, and their ability to have input into the permitting system can now be overruled or overwritten by the ministry, and he can just demand that the MPCA issue a permit. So there's a little bit of frustration, and hopefully when the province looks at the work plan and the mandate of the conservation authorities, they'll review that again, because the protection of people and property is so important, and where their expertise and input is needed, I think it really needs to be listened to. So people can still contribute to that floodplain mapping exercise and look at it and ask questions on the website. It's getinvolved.npca.ca. You can also click on there and it says, "Is my home in a floodplain?" Put your address in, it'll come up and tell you if you're now in the newly mapped floodplain areas. And again, there was one of them that's under the hospital, and then there was some questions about building permits. If one's already been issued, they're under the old floodplain mapping, and if it hasn't been issued yet, the new one would apply. But just some areas there about transition as well. So I think just people, it's very interesting, I think, to know how that floodplain mapping impacts you, and please contribute if you have an interest in reading that background study. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I just want to say, since the province is locking down again on December 26th, please try to support local businesses who are going to be hit hard by this second lockdown. Personally, in my opinion, I do not support another lockdown. I worry that these lockdowns only temporarily slow the virus and that it will not end in 28 days. Just remember, we still have a few days to support our local businesses. And then it's only curbside pickup. So please do. Thank you.
Seeing no further announcements, our next council meeting is scheduled for January 11th, 2021, following the Committee of the Whole meeting. And again, it'll be available through electronic participation. So meeting is adjourned. Oh, wait, sorry, confirming bylaw. It's not adjourned. Don't leave. Need a mover and seconder for, it's late. Mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Dunstall, Councillor Ritchie. It's my daughter's birthday for 3 more minutes. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Ritchie. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 20-97 inclusive and that same be read a first time. All in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. Need a mover and seconder for second and third reading. Councillor Vardy, Councillor Cadwell. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 20-97 inclusive, read a first time, now be read a second and third time, and finally passed, and the mayor and the town clerk to sign and seal the same, and rule of the council to the contrary notwithstanding. All in favor? That's carried. Now meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's.
Merry Christmas.